To many, Gary is a city of steel. Through good times and tough times, some will always see her that way. For many of the people in Gary, Richard G. Hatcher will always be known as mayor. Through good times and tough times, some will always see him that way. And why not? His has been a life of service to the people of this community. Born Richard Gordon Hatcher in Michigan City, Indiana, this native son would rise to prominence in a manner that neither he nor his family could have foreseen. He was the youngest of 13 children. His father, Carlton, worked for Pullman Standard, manufacturing railroad cars, and his mother, Catherine, was a factory worker. As a Depression-era birth, his obstacles were many, the least of which were his working-class roots, modest resources, and blindness in one eye. In high school, he excelled at track and field and football. Utilizing these natural talents, he parlayed them into an athletic scholarship at Indiana University. He went on to earn his law degree at Valparaiso University in 1959, and shortly thereafter was admitted to the Indiana bar. None of us is born an activist. That transformation is a process. We may see the injustice all around us, but when do we choose to act for the betterment of others? For Richard G. Hatcher, the transformation was subtle, and it began at Indiana University and intensified at Valparaiso. He helped organize sit-ins to end segregation in Indiana's restaurants. These acts of protest led him to consistent volunteer work with the NAACP. The law was Richard's strength, a tool that he hoped to master, and he built his early career upon that foundation. First, a private practice, then Lake County Deputy Prosecutor from 1960 to 1963. Politics came through necessity. Looking to better the community in which he lived and labored, he soon found himself a councilman at large on the Gary City Council from 1963 to 1966. In this post, he labored to improve housing, education, and health care for the city's poor. There were institutional obstructions that hindered prosperity for so many of the people in the community where he toiled. Privately at first, and then more publicly, he began to think the unthinkable. He pondered something that conventional wisdom would scoff at. He dared to wonder, aloud, could I change the quality of life here if I was mayor? From thought to action, he mobilized an underdog campaign that would shock the nation. In 1967, a decade plus before Harold Washington would pull off a similar shocker, Richard G. Hatcher did the improbable. He went up against incumbent A. Martin Katz and defeated him in the primary. The general election, he won with 95% of the black vote. He would later joke, "I don't know how I lost the other 5%. At his swearing in as mayor in January of 1968, Richard said, "Gary is a rising sun. Together we shall beat away. Together we shall turn darkness into light, despair into hope, and promise into progress. For God's sake, for Gary's sake, let's get ourselves together."
I can't name all of the people who worked so hard from that first campaign and really challenged the existing structure in Gary, and which was segregated, which basically was oriented to helping those who had a lot and not helping those who didn't have much. For many of the young blacks in the city, my being elected, it was an inspiration on election night. I'll never forget the night, because our headquarters were up around 20th and Broadway. It was right next to our law office, where our law office was. That area, that entire street was simply jammed with people. There were just people, wall to wall people out there, and people were literally dancing in the streets.
Richard was elected mayor of Gary in 1967. He was sworn into office in January of 1968, and he remained in office for the next 20 years. He was briefly an advisor on urban regeneration to Lyndon B. Johnson's administration. As mayor, he used that service to help Gary become a major recipient of federal funding. He used the funding to help with housing, poverty, and crime during his mayoral tenure. Being the mayor always had its challenges: rapidly changing demographics, a downturn in the steel industry, the Jacksons moved to California, but it was family that grounded Richard. On August 8, 1976, Richard married Ruth Ellen Marie Rolls. Fatherhood followed soon after. Daughters Reagan Heather, Rachel Catherine, and Renee Camille gave his life deeper meaning and deeper resolve. 5 terms in office and a rich legacy for both Gary and for America.
Well, I think that, again, if there's anything that I would want to be remembered for, would not be the fact that I am a Negro as such. I would like for it to be known that I was the very best mayor that the city of Gary has ever had, and that I was able to be the kind of mayor who was concerned about the problems of all the people in the city of Gary, no matter where they might live.
I'm so grateful to the people of Gary, and so grateful to those wonderful people who had the courage at the beginning to support me and were willing to support me for mayor. Now, 50 years later, we are celebrating the anniversary of that election.
There were other undertakings: organizer of the 1972 Black Political Convention, law professor, presidential campaign advisor, icon for Black empowerment. Too many, in fact, to do justice here. Richard Gordon Hatcher. For a generation and counting, he will always be mayor.